What was the moment you lost all respect for a teacher? I was in Spanish class when I realized I'd made a horrible mistake. I skipped breakfast and suddenly my glucose monitor started beeping. I need to see the nurse. I wheezed, already feeling dizzy. The student teacher frowned. The state inspector is here. Nobody moves until he's gone. You don't understand. I'm diabetic. Be patient. It's only 20 minutes away. My vision blurred as I tried to make my way towards the door. That's when I heard it. Beep. Student badge access disabled. I'm not letting some teenager with a victim complex ruin my evaluation score. My glucose monitor screamed again. She marched over and ripped it right off my arm. That's enough. No more disruptions, Lucia screamed. That's for her blood sugar levels. I said, sit down. That's when I spotted a shadow moving towards the door. The security guard. He saw my face through the window and started reaching for the handle. Thank goodness. Don't even try. Miss Winter's voice could have cut glass. We're under state review. You opened that door, you're fired. He looked at me, looked at her and walked away. White hot pain shot up my spine. I had 15 minutes before I ended up in a coma or worse, dead. Half the class were lifting their phones up to the ceiling. We were on the 4th floor, the one room in the building where cells never worked. Of course. Put those phones away now. Miss Winter shrieked. You think I'm stupid recording this little performance? She whipped around to face me. Empty your pockets. Show everyone your little props. Candy wrappers fell out. She kicked them across the floor. See? Always eating candy. Always claiming you need sugar. It felt like there were fire ants crawling under my skin. You know what? She grabbed my glucose meter from my backpack. Test yourself. Show us this emergency. My fingers felt like they were on fire. I couldn't even hold the test strips and they scattered on the floor like confetti. Miss Winters scoffed. You can't even fake it properly. My skull felt ready to crack open. That's when Jake started digging through his backpack. I saw the Nature Valley wrapper in his hand. As soon as Miss Winters turned around, he tried to slide it across the floor. Crinkle. Miss Winters' head snapped around. What was that? We froze like a deer in headlights. She marched over. A snack. During state inspection, she crushed it in her fist right over the trash can. Crumbs falling like snow. No outside food during inspection. Rules are rules. My stomach cramped harder. 7 minutes left. That's when Trevor, the school bully, stood up. My dad's a diabetic. She needs sugar now. Suspension starting immediately. Before he could respond, the teacher's pet chimed in. She always does this during important tests. Remember last semester? Ashley, you're crazy for that. Someone yelled. Look at her lips. They're literally blue. 6 minutes left. I tried to stand. My legs gave out. Every movement was agony. But everyone was still too scared to actually do anything. So I did what I had to do. I started dragging myself towards the door. I was reaching for my third pull when Miss Winter stepped on my hand. No one's leaving before 3 p.m.
No exceptions.
Someone help her. Sarah was crying. Anyone who moves gets a 0 for the quarter. 3 minutes left. Trevor was at the door trying his badge. B. Access denied. Other kids joined him. Please. My tongue was swollen now, filling my throat. Miss Winter knelt down right in my face. You know what happened last year when your mother tried to get me fired? I learned exactly what kind of family you come from. 1 minute left. My heart hammered so hard I thought my ribs would crack. She leaned in so close I could see her nose hairs. Pathetic. Your whole family. Pathetic lying manipulators who crack. My head butted against her nose. I felt my brain slam against her skull. Her scream made it worth it. Her blood went everywhere. I grabbed the lanyard swinging from her neck. Everyone watched as I dragged myself to the door. Each inch was torture. Access granted. The lock clicked. Trevor yanked the door open. Nurse now. Someone get the nurse. Call 911. Someone screamed. Miss Winter was still yelling from the classroom. She's faking. They're all being dramatic. This is sabotage. The paramedic said my blood sugar hit 19. I was technically brain dead for 2 minutes. Miss Winter was put on temporary leave, but that wasn't enough for me. She practically tried to kill me, so I was ready to return the favor. We all were. The ambulance ride was a blur of needles and beeping machines and someone shouting numbers that kept getting lower. They wheeled me straight into the emergency room where nurses stuck new monitors all over my chest and arms. The 4 burned going in, but not as bad as my head still pounding from where I'd hit Miss Winter. A doctor with tired eyes explained I'd need to wear a continuous glucose sensor for at least 6 months now since my body had gone through such extreme trauma. Mom grabbed my hand so tight her nails dug into my skin while he told us I was lucky to be alive. My brain felt like it was swimming through mud, but the anger burning in my chest was sharp and clear. A nurse started taking photos of the purple bruise spreading across my hand where Miss Winter had stepped on it. She documented the broken glucose meter pieces they'd found in my backpack and printed out all my blood sugar readings from the past 12 hours. The numbers made her shake her head and mutter something about criminal negligence. A social worker showed up with a clipboard full of forms asking if I wanted to file a report with Child Protective Services. I grabbed the pen before she even finished talking and signed everything she put in front of me. That evening, while I was still hooked up to 3 different machines, the principal called Mom's phone. She put it on speaker and I could hear him choosing every word super carefully, talking about unfortunate incidents and reviewing protocols, but never once saying sorry. He kept mentioning liability insurance and district policies, and I could tell he cared way more about getting sued than about me almost dying. My phone started going crazy with notifications once the nurses said I was stable enough to hold it. The class group chat had hundreds of messages from kids saying they couldn't believe what happened and how scared they were, and how someone should have done something sooner. Lucia sent me a 3-minute voice message where she was crying so hard, I could barely understand her, saying she tried to help but was too scared of getting suspended. Jake texted that he felt terrible about the granola bar and wished he'd thrown it harder. Sarah sent screenshots of everyone posting about it on Instagram already. While Mom talked to doctors about discharge papers and follow-up appointments, I opened the voice recorder on my phone. I whispered everything I could remember into it, while the details were still fresh in my mind. Every word Miss Winter said about my family being pathetic manipulators. Every second that ticked by while she refused to let anyone help. The exact look on the security guard's face when he turned around and walked away, leaving me to die. I saved the recording in 3 different places on my phone, then emailed it to myself twice just to be safe. That night, after we finally got home and I was lying in my own bed, Mom sat on the edge and we had a long talk about what happened last year. Turns out she tried to get Miss Winter fired after she made another diabetic kid wait 20 minutes to test their blood sugar during a quiz. 3 other parents had complained too. But since Miss Winter was still technically a student teacher, the union protected her and said she was still learning proper protocols. This time was different though, because this time we had proof and witnesses and medical records showing she almost killed me. Trevor messaged me privately the next morning while I was eating breakfast, saying his dad wanted to write a statement about diabetic emergencies for our case. His dad had been type 1 diabetic for 30 years and knew exactly how dangerous low blood sugar could be. Trevor apologized for all the times he'd been mean to me in the past, and said watching me almost die had changed something in him. He said he kept seeing my blue lips in his dreams and couldn't stop thinking about how he tried to help, but Miss Winter wouldn't let him. I stared at his message for 5 minutes, not knowing what to say back. Then Ashley started posting in the group chat that I'd planned the whole thing to get Miss Winter in trouble. She brought up how I'd had to leave during state testing last semester when my blood sugar dropped and said I was creating a pattern on purpose. She said her mom knew someone on the school board who told her Miss Winter was an excellent teacher who would never hurt a student. The anger made my hand shake so bad I almost dropped my phone, but I forced myself to stay calm and screenshot every single message she sent. The security guard found my Instagram that same afternoon and sent me a direct message saying he was sorry for walking away. He said he had 3 kids and needed his job to pay rent and knew what he did was wrong, but couldn't afford to get fired. He begged me not to file a formal complaint against him because he'd lose everything and his family would end up homeless. Reading his message made me feel sick to my stomach, but I screenshotted that too and saved it in my evidence folder. 2 days later, I had to go back to the school for a meeting with the nurse to update my medical care plan. She looked like she hadn't slept in days and kept apologizing over and over, even though she wasn't even there when it happened. She promised to document everything about the 4th floor being a cell phone dead zone, and how that put students in danger during medical emergencies. Something feels off about Miss Winter's extreme reaction to a medical emergency. I wonder if there's history between these families that goes deeper than just last year's complaint. The way she specifically mentioned the mother trying to get her fired and called them pathetic lying manipulators suggests this is personal, not just about maintaining order during an inspection. She said she was going to recommend installing a landline in every classroom on that floor, and making sure all teachers knew the emergency protocols for diabetic students. 2 days later, the district's 504 coordinator showed up at our house with a thick folder and a laptop. She set everything up on our kitchen table while Mom made coffee, and I sat there picking at the bandage on my arm. The coordinator pulled out forms and started explaining how my disability accommodations had been violated, and this could be a federal issue. Mom's pen flew across her notepad, taking down every word while I watched the coordinator's mouth move, but couldn't focus on the medical terms floating past me. She kept pointing to different sections of the law, and showing us cases where schools had to pay huge fines for similar situations. My brain felt like mush trying to understand all the legal stuff, but I caught enough to know we had a real case. The next morning, I called the main office and asked about this super important state inspector, who was supposedly worth me almost dying for. The secretary fumbled through papers for 5 minutes before finding the inspection schedule. Turns out it was just a routine yearly check. Nothing special at all. She said inspectors come through all the time and teachers aren't supposed to lock down classrooms for them. I asked if there were any special rules about the inspection, and she laughed, saying Miss Winter must have made that up herself. The whole lockdown thing was completely her own crazy interpretation of basic guidelines that just said to keep classes running normally during visits. After school that same day, Lucia texted everyone to meet in the library. Jake showed up first with his backpack. Then Sarah came in looking nervous, and Trevor slouched in last, acting like he didn't care, but I could tell he did. We spread out notebooks on the table and started writing down everything we remembered from that day. Jake pulled out the crushed Nature Valley wrapper he'd secretly kept from when Miss Winter destroyed it. Sarah remembered exact times because she'd been checking her phone under her desk, even though we had no signal. Trevor drew a diagram of where everyone was sitting and who tried to help first. Lucia made a timeline showing every minute from when my monitor first beat to when the paramedics arrived. We photocopied everything 3 times so we'd all have copies for whatever came next. My first full day back at the school hit me like a truck. Kids stared at me in the hallways and whispered behind their hands when I walked past. Some looked at me with pity, others with this weird fascination like I was some kind of celebrity for almost dying. Walking past the Spanish classroom made my chest tighten up so bad I couldn't breathe. My hands started shaking and black spots danced in my vision just like that day. I stumbled to the nurse's office where she let me lie down while she called the counselor. The counselor came in and said panic attacks were a normal trauma response, but nothing about this felt normal to me. She gave me breathing exercises to try to pass to skip Spanish class for the rest of the week. 3 days after that, the principal finally called us in for a meeting. He sat behind his big desk looking uncomfortable while Mom and I sat in the hard plastic chairs. He confirmed Miss Winter was on paid administrative leave while they investigated everything. He kept mentioning the teachers' union and their lawyers every other sentence like he was warning us this would be complicated. Mom leaned forward and asked why attempted murder wasn't being considered, since a teacher deliberately prevented a dying child from getting medical help. The principal's face went white as a sheet, and he started stammering about district policies and proper channels. The next bombshell dropped when I got called to the office the following Monday. The assistant principal handed me a detention slip for assault, saying I'd headbutt Miss Winter. I stared at the paper in disbelief, while she explained that violence was never acceptable regardless of circumstances. Mom showed up within 10 minutes of my panicked phone call, and laughed bitterly right in the assistant principal's face. She said they could try giving me detention, but our lawyer would love to hear about them punishing a dying child for trying to survive. The assistant principal's jaw tightened, but she took the detention slip back and ripped it up without another word. That afternoon, the nurse called me down to her office where she had boxes of my medical files spread across her desk. We spent 2 hours going through every document from the past year, showing my documented diabetes diagnosis and all the emergency protocols. She helped me organize everything by date, highlighting every time the school was officially notified about my condition. We created a timeline with sticky notes showing each notification, each form filed, each meeting about my medical needs. The stack of papers grew so thick we needed a rubber band to hold it together. By the time we finished, we had enough evidence to prove the school knew exactly what to do in a diabetic emergency. Between classes the next day, a girl from the school paper caught up with me by my locker. She said she wanted to do an interview about what happened because other students were scared it could happen to them. She explained how the fourth-floor cell phone problem affected everyone, and people needed to know the truth. Part of me wanted to stay quiet and just let everything blow over, but another part wanted everyone to know exactly what Miss Winter did. I told her I'd think about it, and she handed me her card with her email address. The security guard found me during lunch the day after that, pulling me into an empty hallway. He looked around nervously before whispering that Miss Winter had specifically threatened his job when he tried to help me. He said she mentioned his recent warning for being late, and told him one more strike meant termination. I pulled out my phone and hit record while he repeated everything, his voice shaking as he described watching me dying through the window. He said he'd been having nightmares about not opening that door, and wanted to testify if we needed him. The Big 504 meeting happened that Friday with the coordinator, mom, the principal, and 2 district lawyers all crammed into a conference room. The coordinator explained I could file a complaint with the Office for Civil Rights, since my disability rights were clearly violated. She said the process could take months, but would trigger a federal investigation into the school's practices. Mom and I looked at each other across the table, and I could see the determination in her eyes matching mine. We were going all the way with this no matter how long it took or how hard they fought us. The next day my phone started buzzing during breakfast and wouldn't stop. Someone had made an Instagram account called Classroom Truth 2024 and posted about what happened in Spanish class. They got everything wrong though. The post said, "I randomly attacked Miss Winter because she asked me to wait for the nurse. It said I was eating candy in class and got mad when she took it away." The worst part was the photo they used, a blurry shot of Miss Winter's bloody nose with a caption, "Student attacks teacher over snack." Comments were pouring and calling me crazy, saying I should be expelled, asking why I wasn't arrested yet. My hands shook as I scrolled through hundreds of messages flooding my DMs. People from the school I'd never even talked to were calling me a psycho. Some girl from another district said she heard I planned the whole thing for attention. I tried reporting the account, but Instagram said it didn't violate guidelines. Mom helped me set my account to private, but screenshots were already spreading everywhere. Trevor texted me that afternoon saying he'd gone back to check the Spanish classroom. The janitor hadn't emptied the trash yet, and the crushed Nature Valley bar was still there, covered in pencil shavings and paper scraps. He put on latex gloves from the science lab and bagged the whole thing in a Ziploc. His dad had taught him about keeping evidence clean for court cases. He took photos of everything, the trash can, the timestamp on his phone showing the date, even a wide shot of the classroom. Having the school bully suddenly helping me felt weird, but I needed all the proof I could get. That same evening, someone started a shared Google Doc for witness statements. The link spread through our class group chat. People were writing what they saw, some backing me up, others staying neutral. One person wrote that they saw my lips turning blue. Another mentioned hearing Miss Winter say nobody could leave. Ashley wrote that I always pulled stunts during important days and this was probably another fake emergency. But then someone posted screenshots from the group chat during the incident. Messages with timestamps showing people knew something was really wrong. "She looks like she's dying at 2:47 p.m. Should we call 911? At 2:49 p.m. Miss Winter won't let us at 2:50 p.m. The messages kept coming, showing how everyone watched me collapse, but stayed frozen in their seats. The school newspaper editor filed something called a Freedom of Information Act request the next morning. She wanted the security badge logs from that day to prove when our access got cut off. She also asked for any emails about the state inspection and classroom protocols. The administration suddenly got really nervous about this. The principal called her parents saying she was disrupting the investigation. Her parents backed her up though, saying public records were public records. The editor posted online that the school had 30 days to respond, but was already trying to block her request. Meanwhile, the school nurse typed up a 3-page report about the fourth-floor problem. The school trying to give detention for assault when someone literally fought to stay alive. Takes bureaucratic stupidity to Olympic levels. Next, they'll charge drowning victims with disturbing the peace for splashing too loudly. She wrote that the Spanish classroom was in a dead zone where phones couldn't get signal. She called it a safety hazard that almost killed a student. She submitted it to the school board with a request for emergency signal boosters. The board secretary emailed back saying they would review it at their monthly meeting in 3 weeks. The nurse forwarded that email to my mom with a note saying 3 weeks could mean another dead student. Then the FOIA request actually worked and we got the documents. The email showed something huge. The state inspector was never in our building that day. They were doing their review in the elementary school across town. There was no lockdown requirement, no rule about keeping doors sealed, nothing. Miss Winter made the whole thing up. The timestamp on the emails proved the inspector finished their visit 2 hours before my emergency even started. We had proof she lied about everything. The security guard reached out through my mom's lawyer asking to meet. He looked terrible, bags under his eyes, hands shaking as he drank his coffee. He said he'd give a statement, but only if we included that he tried to help at first. He kept saying he needed his job, had 3 kids, couldn't afford to lose his income. We agreed because his testimony about Miss Winter threatening his job was important. He wrote everything down. How she said he'd be fired if he opened the door. How he saw me through the window looking half dead. How he'd been having nightmares about walking away. 2 weeks later, an official letter arrived about a disciplinary hearing. They were charging me with assault for the headbutt incident. The letter said I could face suspension or expulsion. Mom's lawyer called it retaliation and documented everything. He said they were trying to flip a story, make me the bad guy instead of the victim. The hearing was set for next month, and they wanted character witnesses against me. I got so mad I finally posted my side online. I was done hiding while lies spread everywhere. I wrote out everything that happened, posted my hospital record showing my blood sugar at 19, included the paramedic report saying I was technically dead for 2 minutes. The response exploded immediately. Some people supported me, sharing their own stories about teachers who abused power. Others called me a liar looking for attention. One woman said I should be in jail for assault. I spent 6 hours that night blocking accounts, reporting death threats, watching my story get twisted in real time. The 504 coordinator called an emergency meeting the next day. She said going public could hurt the federal investigation, that I needed to be careful about my posts. She showed me examples of other cases that fell apart because of social media. But staying quiet felt like surrender. We made a deal that I would only post facts. No opinions about Miss Winter's motives. No speculation about why she did it. Ashley started her petition the next morning before first period. She stood by the main entrance with a clipboard and her fake concerned face. She was telling everyone that Miss Winter was just doing her job, and the state inspector rules were strict. Kids who weren't even there started signing it. Some of them were her friends from student council. Others just wanted to look like they cared about teachers. I watched from the second-floor window as she collected name after name. Trevor texted me that she had about 30 signatures by lunch. She walked into the principal's office at 2:15 with this smug look on her face. I could see her through the glass door handing over the papers. The principal nodded and took them. She came out smiling like she just won something. 2 days later, we had a fire drill during third period. The alarm started screaming and my whole body locked up. The sound was exactly like my glucose monitor alarm from that day. My hands started shaking and I couldn't breathe right. Everyone was filing out to the parking lot, but I couldn't move. My legs turned to jelly and I dropped right there in the hallway. The walls felt like they were closing in. My chest got so tight I thought I was dying. Kids were stepping around me trying to get outside. The nurse found me curled up against the lockers, hyperventilating. She had to call my mom to come get me. Mom was there in 10 minutes and helped me to the car. I couldn't stop shaking the whole ride home. That same afternoon, our lawyer called with news about the batch system. The IT department had pulled all the logs from that day. The record showed Miss Winter manually disabled student access at 2:47 p.m. The inspector didn't even arrive until 3:15. She'd locked us in almost half an hour before any one official showed up. Our lawyer said this was huge. The timestamp proved she planned it. She knew exactly what she was doing when she trapped us. The next day, the security guard statement came through. He wrote down everything Miss Winter said to him word for word. She told him if he opened that door, he'd be fired. She actually said to think about his kids. He had twin daughters in elementary school. She used his kids to threaten him while I was dying. His statement showed she saw my condition and chose her evaluation score. Anyway, the lawyer added this to our growing pile of evidence. We filed the formal 504 complaint that Friday. The paperwork was thick as a textbook. It listed everything Miss Winter did wrong. She destroyed my glucose monitor, which is medical equipment. She blocked my access to the nurse during a medical emergency. She prevented other students from helping me get treatment. Our lawyer mentioned my mom's complaint from last year too. He said it showed a pattern of discrimination against students with medical needs. The school had 7 days to respond. 3 days into their response period, the principal called my mom. He wanted to set up what he called a restorative justice meeting. Miss Winter would apologize and we'd all move forward without pressing charges. He said it would be better for everyone to heal and learn from this. Mom actually laughed at him on the phone. She asked if he'd want just an apology if someone almost killed his kid. He went quiet for a long time. Then he said he'd have to consult with the district. Mom hung up on him. That night, I couldn't sleep thinking about everything. Getting Miss Winter fired wasn't enough anymore. Other kids could end up in the same situation. We needed real changes to make sure this never happened again. The next morning, I told Mom we should push for new policies, emergency protocols for medical situations, required training for all teachers about diabetes and other conditions, clear rules about when students can access medical help. Mom loved the idea. She said making something good come from this was better than just revenge. We started writing up our demands for the school board. 2 days later, a thick envelope arrived from Miss Winter's union. Their lawyer said I could face assault charges for the headbutt. They claimed I attacked her when she was trying to help me. The letter said if we kept pursuing action against her, they'd file charges. Our lawyer called them within an hour. He explained that self-defense during a medical emergency isn't assault. He also said threatening a minor victim was witness intimidation. The union backed off by the end of the day. They sent a one-line email saying they were reviewing the situation. The following week, we met with a civil attorney downtown. She specialized in cases against individual teachers, not just schools. She explained we could sue Miss Winter personally for assault. We could also claim false imprisonment since she locked us in. The emotional distress claim was the strongest, though. She said the potential damages could destroy Miss Winter financially. Her house, her car, her retirement savings could all be at risk. Mom wanted to file immediately, but I asked for time to think. The school board meeting was coming up in 2 days. They'd added our case to the public comments section. We'd have exactly 3 minutes to explain what happened, 3 minutes to describe how I almost died begging for help, 3 minutes to make them understand why everything had to change. Mom and I practiced what we'd say over and over. We timed it with a stopwatch to make sure we didn't go over. Every word had to count. The morning of the board meeting, my phone started blowing up with texts from kids at the school. The state inspector's office had put out this big statement on their website saying they never told anyone to lock down classrooms during their visits. They said they were really worried about how their name got used to hurt students. Mom printed it out like 20 times and stuffed copies in her folder. The next day at the school was weird because about 50 kids just sat down in the main hallway during lunch. They had signs asking for the 4th floor to get cell service and for new rules about medical emergencies. The principal kept walking by them looking stressed while teachers tried to get them to move. Security guards stood around not really doing anything. Some kids got detention slips, but they just kept sitting there. Someone's mom showed up with a news camera, and suddenly the principal disappeared into his office. The nurse came out later that day with this new form for all of us with medical conditions to sign. She called it something boring and official, but kids started calling it the survival clause because it meant we could leave class for emergencies without asking. My disciplinary hearing happened 3 days later in this small conference room that smelled like old coffee. They gave me 3 days of in-school suspension for hitting Miss Winter, but the lady reading the decision kept saying stuff about extreme circumstances and life-threatening situations. Our lawyer said it was actually good because it meant they admitted I was dying. The suspension room had better Wi-Fi than most classrooms, which was pretty funny. I'm really curious how the IT log showed Miss Winter disabled the badges at 247, but the inspector came at 3:15. Did she plan this whole thing before anyone official even showed up? 2 weeks after that came the big 504 complaint hearing with 5 people from the district sitting behind this long table looking serious. Mom had everything organized in these color-coded folders with the badge logs showing how my access got turned off. All the witness statements from kids in the class, my medical records from the hospital, and even security footage from the hallway camera. Miss Winter's representative kept saying she thought she was following protocol, but you could see the district people weren't buying it. The security guard showed up looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. His hands were shaking when he described watching me through the window and not being able to help. He said Miss Winter told him he'd lose his job if he opened the door, and that he thinks about that moment every single day. One of the district officials kept writing notes really fast while another one just stared at Miss Winter. Ashley got her turn at the actual school board meeting that night and stood up there talking about how Miss Winter was just trying to keep order during an important inspection. The board members kept their faces blank, but I saw one of them pull out her phone under the table and start typing something. Later, Mom said she was probably looking up what happens when blood sugar hits 19. Ashley kept talking, but people in the audience started shifting in their seats and looking at each other. The student newspaper girl had been working on this huge investigation for weeks, and it went online the next morning. She had everything laid out with timestamps and interviews showing how the fourth floor never had cell service, how Miss Winter made up the inspector lockdown thing, and how she was ignored every safety rule we had. The comments section went crazy with parents freaking out and demanding meetings. By lunch, the local news picked it up and reporters started showing up at the school. 3 days later, Miss Winter wasn't in her classroom anymore. They moved her to some office job at the district building where she couldn't be around students, but they were still paying her. Mom was mad about that, but I felt better knowing she couldn't do this to anyone else. The kids who did the sit-in had to serve their detentions, but they walked around school like they'd won something big. Within a week, these white boxes appeared on the fourth floor walls, and suddenly everyone had full bars on their phones. Kids kept joking that I almost had to die to get them Wi-Fi, but it wasn't really that funny when you thought about it too hard. The state education department showed up 2 weeks later with clipboards and serious faces. They went through every classroom, every policy book, every emergency drill record from the past 5 years. The principal started showing up to assemblies with bags under his eyes that got darker each week. He'd stand at the podium and his hands would shake while he talked about new safety measures. The investigators found 12 different protocol violations, just in how they handled medical emergencies. They found 7 more about staff training requirements that nobody had followed. The school board had emergency meetings 3 nights in a row. Parents packed the auditorium and everyone was yelling. The next Monday, they announced mandatory medical emergency training for every single teacher and staff member. Big red emergency buttons appeared in every classroom over winter break. The kind that went straight to 911 and the main office at the same time. They put special ones in the bathrooms too. The buttons glowed red all day and night. You couldn't miss them. Some parents started a Facebook group called Supporting Our Teachers, and they posted about how we were making the school look bad. They said property values would drop if people thought our school was dangerous. Mom showed me the messages they sent her, calling her an opportunist and saying she was using me for attention. We took screenshots of everything and added them to the folder our lawyer kept. The security guard found me by my locker one afternoon, and we both just stood there for a minute. He said he was sorry for walking away that day. I told him I was sorry he got put in that position. Neither of us should have been apologizing, but we both needed to say it. He told me he was transferring to the elementary school next month. The district rewrote my 504 plan with the strongest language they'd ever used. It said I could leave any classroom, any assembly, any situation where I felt medically unsafe, no questions asked. It said any teacher who blocked my medical access would face immediate termination. Other kids with diabetes started asking for the same exact wording in their plans. Their parents brought my case to every meeting. The district approved them all within a month. Miss Winter's union filed an appeal saying the district violated her contract and her due process rights. Our lawyer said this was normal, that unions always fight even when they know they'll lose. He said it would drag on for months and we needed to be patient. Patience tasted bitter in my mouth every time I thought about it. Mom found me a therapist who specialized in medical trauma. She had an office with soft chairs and never made me talk if I didn't want to. She told me what Miss Winter did was attempted manslaughter through deliberate indifference. She said those exact words. Having someone with a medical degree say, "Miss Winter almost killed me." Made something loosen in my chest. She gave me exercises for the panic attacks that started whenever I heard beeping sounds. She taught me how to breathe through the nightmares where I was back in that classroom with the door locked. 5 months passed before I could walk by the 4th floor without my heart racing. When I finally did, I saw the new signal boosters mounted on every wall. Full bars everywhere now. The emergency buttons glowed red by every door. Impossible to ignore. The nurse told me they'd hired 2 more medical staff just for our building. She said they'd changed the whole emergency response system. Nobody could override medical emergencies anymore. Not for state inspections, not for anything. Miss Winter was still technically employed by the district, working in some basement office downtown filing paperwork. Our lawyer set termination cases with unions took forever. She couldn't come within 500 feet of the school though. Every diabetic kid in our district was safer now because of what happened to me. The policies, the buttons, the training, all of it. Sometimes I wanted more. Wanted her in jail. Wanted real justice. But watching younger kids with glucose monitors walk the halls without fear, knowing they'd never be trapped like I was, that had to be enough. Sometimes that has to be enough. Thanks for letting me wonder about all these things with you today. It's been really interesting sharing these thoughts together. Until next time, subscribe for more content like